why does the entity respond? Like, how is the entity forced to respond, or are you saying like, what?
Yeah, because like,
what is it? Why is it motivated to respond? Like, which?
Okay, let's do that. Let's say that.
What motivates it to respond?
Right, because like who governs this spiritual world? I mean, it's
Yeah, I mean that's why that I mentioned that
why is it
the
motivated?
sorcerer magician tries to I wouldn't say that every sorcerer magician uses like a circle of protection or something that I guess you could say protects themselves, but there's almost always this idea that okay, if you're trying to summon this being to get it to do something for you and you're not worshiping it, then you try to maintain authority in the ritual. So, but that authority is maintained. It just depends on which being you're working with, to be honest. Like, since I worship Odin and Kalima, I don't try to maintain authority in the relationship or when I summon Odin. I try to learn and basically give my thanks to them and ask them for things instead of trying to force them to give me things. Or, even when I make offerings, I'll make offerings to Odin and Kalima and I'll ask for something, but I don't demand anything in return. So, like, when I started working with Saint Expedite recently, he definitely got back to me really quick. But before I knew that it had worked, I had already given him 1 pound cake before when I was trying to communicate with him and open up a bridge. And then I gave him another pound cake after because I said I would, even though I didn't know that it had worked yet. And soon after, like I said, that guy contacted me, wanted to pay for me doing rituals for him for this or that, which I passed over to somebody else. But and then of course that lady that sent me $50 today, she had told me she was going to send me that money soon after I did the ritual or the offering and the prayers that Saint Expedite wanted. But when it comes to like summoning beings like this and not just asking them for stuff, a lot of these beings are just so powerful. Like Beelzebub is so powerful, Belial, Paimon, that when you try to force them to do something, like King Solomon, ancient Jewish king, he basically enslaved demons in order to build the Temple of Solomon, but he used the angels to like force the demons into basically being slaves and building this temple. You can interpret that literally or not, but when you're working with demons and you're not trying to enslave them, then you either have to have a really good relationship with them or be very certain that you have control in the ritual. Or you have to have a good relationship with them and they want to work with you. So it's very hard to put like a blanket statement on how to motivate beings to basically work for you in a ritual, but that authority needs to be established. If you're not worshiping, or if you don't have a good relationship, if you're not seeking a good relationship, or you just want to make an offering and get something done in your life, then you have to be very careful with the authority thing.
So motivated, meaning that it's not going to respond unless you're worshiping it.
Not necessarily.
So
it'll respond if you give it a proper sacrifice, or like if you offer, like, let's say like a really nice chalice to it with wine, bread, maybe some meat, kind of mixing different offerings. You say, okay, here I'm giving you all this, and I'm summoning you forth,
mm-hmm.
but I want you to do this in my life. And then you might actually provide more motivation, like, hey, I'll give you more stuff, I'll offer you more stuff afterwards. And like, when you offer stuff to a spirit being, demon, whatever, god, the food doesn't look like it's been eaten, it doesn't disappear, but you will notice that the food, like when I offer stuff to Odin, I notice that the alcohol is missing something after it has a different tint to it. It doesn't feel as full-bodied. And so I know that Odin basically took the essence out of that alcohol, or even with like bread, especially with bread or meat, if you leave it on an altar for, a day or two, that meat, it's not just that it will look like meat if you just left it out on the counter in your kitchen for a few days. There would be something different about that meat or bread that will make you say, okay, that being has taken the essence out of this. But it's over time that you start to be able to recognize it. It's hard to explain. But you definitely have to work at it to recognize when an offering has been basically quote unquote eaten by a being.
I don't understand these two.
Which ones?
These two concepts. This one and this one, because who's in charge? I would say that if you summon, I would say that no matter what religion, if you summon this entity, which
Yeah.
we're not sure, like how like whatever.
Well, I mean, a lot of the time, if you're a very skilled practitioner, you might use incense smoke. You might place it before something like a protection circle, and then you have like this in front of you. You might have a circle, then a square, then a triangle in the middle, and then you put incense in front of this design, and then once you do that, if you're powerful enough, you will be able to see the being in the incense, and you might be able to even pick up some of the things that they're saying within your own mind. Which is hard to believe for somebody that hasn't really experienced it before, but there's been times when I've experienced things like that with Odin, and Kali Ma is very overwhelming. But yeah, incense smoking, you see them kind of like take shape. You can open your mind in a way that allows ideas that you didn't know before to come in, or basically actually hear the voice from time to time, or experience something that lets you know that the connection was made. It's not just left up to faith. A lot of the time, the things that we're talking about, there's actually evidence for a single individual, if not more individuals that they might see on a video. Like, I've had some videos where it's like obviously messed with by a spiritual being that people are like, wow, that actually sounds like something was there. Or you see this weird light, this orb, and then it's obvious to other people, like, that's not normal camera behavior. I showed you some of these clips, but yeah, I mean, over time, you start to develop this ability to either be able to perceive them or make them so obvious that they are perceived by everybody.
Do these entities manifest in other?
It's hard for entities to manifest here on Earth because matter is so dense. The material world, it's very dense matter. In the astral realms, everything's not as dense. The energy is not as dense, but here in the material world, energy is dense, consciousness is dense, nothing's really light, and we start to have this feeling that there isn't anything supernatural just because we're so focused on being able to see things as being a solid material or something that is visually easy to see, but really the connections are being made, and the astral realms are higher than this one. It's just that we expect to see them in our materialistic way when we can't always. Very rarely do you see it like a full material manifestation, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, it makes sense. Okay.
Yeah, it's difficult to gain the abilities to do this, and I have enough ability, but just barely enough.
This is the key right here. That is going to be tough to kind of decipher here.
Are you talking about like the fall of things, or like the division between the source or God and the rest of the manifestation that's kind of divided by Maya? Are you talking about through Hindu, or are you talking about like through Christian understanding?
Well, I mean, it's the same.
Kind of in certain aspects. I wouldn't. I think that it ultimately is the same if you go into deep Christianity, into like you start looking at the Bible as like a metaphysical document instead of like everything is exactly literal.
Because we don't know what if going back to that last subject we talked about, like escaping death, right?
Escaping death.
That's how you know you're fallen, because if you weren't fallen, you would have eternity.
Well, just because your body dies, does that really mean that you're dead? Just because we can't perceive something, that doesn't mean that we don't continue on in a better form. Now, we might see somebody that looks dead and they're like, oh, that's going to happen to me, that's terrible. But really, I think it's a joyous thing because we're transitioning, and we're transitioning out of the density of this material world. So I always find it strange when people think just death in general is a bad thing. It's just a transition period. Just because we don't see them here, it means they're in a different plane. They're somewhere else, and all we see that's left is material.